All right. Well, welcome to the podcast. Glad you guys are back this week.
Jeff ought asked me if we're ever going to get a new song.
Well, I tried, and you made fun of the new one. So now we're back to the old one.
I did not. No, I did not make fun of
Jeff
the new one.
do you want a new song?
Jeff
if you
wants
do,
it. He does.
Jeff is going to pick it. I'm done
No,
picking
well, I
songs.
told him every time we pick something, YouTube flags it. So
Yeah. Well, no, that's just when we pick like
I know.
songs.
Yeah,
Like
no
copyrighted
songs.
songs,
Yeah. I don't even remember what was the other song you did.
I don't know, something else that was cool. Not cool enough for you, apparently.
It wasn't DC Talk, so
Matter of opinion.
shut it down.
They wouldn't shut down DC Talk because it's like probably public domain by now. So
Not quite.
Speaking of welcome home to the Kenya team.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah, I saw Gracewood last night. Yeah.
An entire family plus a few.
Yep.
That's
That
awesome.
was an extended trip. It's
Yeah.
so cool.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
sure.
And one of them actually turned around and went to CenterKid yesterday. So was it less than 24 hours
It was.
It
yeah.
was.
from being
Right
home?
at it.
So that is the hands and feet of Jesus.
That's amazing.
Literally in
Yeah.
action. I love
And
it.
our team is at Citrus this week.
Yes.
That's right.
And
That's awesome.
BCM team is on mission in Alaska. So we've got
Yep.
lots of coverage on mission.
And students leave next Tuesday,
Mhm.
a week from today.
Yep. All
And
kind
our
of stuff.
UK
going on.
team leaves next. Is it Friday?
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the UK trips. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of our, that's right.
Non-stop,
Mhm.
but good times. Well, if you can't tell by the vocal range of Jeff's voice, he's not feeling the best today. Woke up yesterday with a sinus infection.
Little sinus infection. Kind of had it into last week, and throat was hurting, and I just thought, it's just drainage, allergy stuff, whatever, you know. But it turned into and maybe it was the whole time. I don't know how that works, but anyway, just I told Tim Murray last night. I said, man, I feel like I've got. No, I was telling John, and Tim Murray was beside me. I said, I feel like I've got a toothache in my face.
It's terrible.
And Tim said, your teeth are in your face. I'm like, you know what I'm talking about, dude.
Good point.
Yeah, quit being so literal. I meant the pain is up here in my jaw, not in my teeth. But I got a couple shots, and I'm on antibiotics. So
Yeah. Good. Well, hope
yeah,
knock that out
we're on
quick.
vacation tomorrow. We'll get a little bit of rest, and it's kind of hit all those things hit at a good time. Of course, all the kids are going to be there, so I'm not sure about rest. But
Good times.
I will be the one who takes Graham for the nap.
Yeah. there
Graham, you
go.
sleepy? Yeah, you're sleepy.
You
Come on.
mean, yeah, Graham will be taking you for that.
No doubt about it.
Need a new diaper? Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't. I
You don't
changed
like
our
diapers?
It's weird, man. I changed our kids' diapers. Not a problem at all. I was all into that. Not, I was willing to help any way. Grandkids, man, it's just different. I don't know. I just like, no, I'm good. Yeah, I was like, no. So
Done my time.
Nathan was 3 months old before I changed his diaper.
really,
That's
Joey
a diva.
did them all.
That is a diva, right?
No,
a diva mom.
No, it's just an awesome Joey.
It is an awesome joke.
Yeah, it's an awesome Joey. But I don't see how he had time to do that. Like,
He actually took 3 months off.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
What a guy.
I know.
Yeah. Dad of the year.
Why does Patty always come in here and just make us feel terrible?
It's Joey.
It is
Joey.
Joey. No, it's not
Yeah.
Patty. It's Joey. Exactly.
Showing us up.
Man,
Happy Father's Day, guys.
yeah. My husband took
Happy
3
Father's
months
Day.
off.
You're
What
doing
did you
terrible.
do? Man, took 3 months off.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's awesome, but whatever, Joey.
We're so happy for you, Patty.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was Father's Day Sunday. It was funny. I was just scrolling social media later in the afternoon, and it was like multiple accounts. It was so funny to see all the social media accounts that were posting memes or videos or whatever that were like, Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day. We love you, mothers. So glad you're here. We've got a special message just for you this morning. And then it's like Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. All right, now we'll turn into the scripture where we were last
Yeah.
week and carry on. Or it was Happy Father's Day. You're doing terrible. You
Yeah.
need to stop being boys and
Yeah.
be men.
Exactly. It's either one or the other.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's good
The
stuff.
video with the crying kid.
I was like, yeah.
That was amazing.
That was funny.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was a
True.
good video. It was a really good video.
So, yep. Happy late Father's Day
Yeah.
again.
I didn't forget about it, but I kind of did because we did Father's Day the week before because Alex's birthday was that weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So I was just like, let's just all do it at one time
Yeah.
because they were going to get me a golf bag and I wanted to go ahead and get it. So
Yeah.
I'm like, let's just do it that weekend.
Nice.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
Nice. Well, yeah. So we continued our
Stayed in 1 Corinthians.
series in 1 Corinthians. We'll turn right to where we were last week. But it really was a great message. It was cool to see kind of coming out of 8 and how those tied together. It's like 8 flowed straight into 9.
Yes.
Which is kind of how this whole series has been. So it's been cool to see those tie together as we've walked through this book. Kind of to maybe get us started in this one, and I guess this is kind of jumping down into it a little more, but Paul gets into, in 20, to the Jews I became a Jew in order to win the Jews, to those under the law I became under the law. What are maybe some examples? Because last week we looked at Paul saying basically if eating meat's going to offend a brother, then I won't eat meat.
Right.
And so kind of taking it to this next step of, okay, well, to the Jew I became a Jew, to those under the law I became under the law. What are maybe just to get us started, some examples of that maybe in our culture?
Oh,
he's out.
Sorry, I'm on medicine. Sorry.
Antibiotics knocked him
my
out.
medicine. If my medicine kicks in,
Yeah,
no,
that's
it's good. Yeah. If I get quiet over here, y'all may need to shake me.
Patty, do you have anything?
I just need a long stick.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Hit me on the head with it. I think it really started with. It's interesting. 9 starts with Paul defending himself to the Corinthian church. I mean, it's a church he started. Obviously, a huge part of the Corinthian church, and now he's having to defend himself not many years later. And so but Corinth was such an interesting place and very educated, socioeconomic was high, culturally is very up there. And so these people had a lot of pride, a lot of arrogance. We talked about that last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago. And some of the people were mad at Paul because, he normally the practice of a traveling apostle was to receive help from the church. Well, Paul received help from the Philippian church, didn't receive help from the Corinthian church, and he would just be different in different places because it was whatever the church needed and whatever condition they were in financially, and so he didn't want to put the church in a burden. So like Corinthian church, he didn't take any help from them, but the other traveling apostles did. So like Peter did and Barnabas did, and those guys that would come through and teach. And they're like, well, Paul, what's up with you? Like, you can't take our money. It's just this. And Paul kind of gets into this conversation of, yeah, I've got the right to do that, but I choose not to do that because I don't want to put you under any kind of burden. So he kind of begins this conversation flowing out of 8, which is this idea of a lot of things we have rights to do, but having a right to do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, And so I've got to be more concerned about who am I around, what's the environment, and how's it going to affect, the people that I'm ministering to. So that's kind of what Paul got into there. And then really just kind of went into this proclamation of, man, this is the philosophy of my life. Like if Paul had a life mission statement, I think his life mission statement was, I become all things to all people that I might win some. Like that's just, used to be, we don't hear about it as much anymore, but man, when I was coming up in ministry, everybody had to have their life mission statement, their family's mission statement, that kind of stuff was popping around. But I think if Paul had one, I think that's it. And I think that's what he explains here is like, this is how I live my life. And I want it to impact eternity. I don't necessarily am that concerned about, here's one thing that I think Paul, when I look at our church ministry culture today, there's a lot of people that want to make sure that people know what they accomplished. And a lot of self-promotion, a lot of, it's just weird. Like I just don't understand how we can do that and then look at the scriptures and go, yeah, man, I'm on track. And then here's Paul, who didn't really care if anybody knew what he did. Like, I don't think Paul ever wanted to be the center stage of anything. I think before he got saved, he did. I think he loved and he reveled in being that leader of the Pharisaical movement and being the, he gives the list in Philippians, here's who I was, boom, 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 boom. All of them, very high, his family lineage, all that was very important to him. When he got saved, he was like, nothing about this is about me.
Yeah.
This is about Christ and what he's done for me, and how I can help people understand that. So, I think there are, and I think the way that translates down to us, I'm gonna get to your answer your question in just a minute. I think the way that translates down to us is we've always got to be asking ourselves the question, what are those things that we value and what are we protecting? Like, I think that's how it translates down to us, because Paul very clearly didn't value anything in the world. And I think Paul would be kind of the ideal, like something we all should. Now, Jesus obviously is our ideal, but Paul would say, follow me as I follow Christ. What Paul modeled was, I consider everything that I've ever done in my life rubbish as compared to knowing Christ. So I don't think he's saying that those things didn't have value in his life. Those things got him to where he was. But once he got to that point, and then he understood what had the most value, and it was a value that he was given that he did nothing for.
Yeah.
Like everything else he lists that he valued, he worked for. The most valuable thing in his life was Jesus, and he didn't do anything for that. Wasn't even looking for him. I think Paul's conversion experience is such a mind-blowing, interesting picture of what the Holy Spirit does. Because, we're always taught, man, go out, share the faith, go out, share faith, go out, share your faith. That's how people are going to get saved. And I believe that. But I can tell you this, wasn't nobody looking for Paul but Jesus.
Yep.
Here's Paul on his way to murder people, and Jesus comes down and strikes him on the road to Damascus. So Paul got it. He understood and he models his life after that. So Paul models his life based on what he values. We all model our life based on what we value. That's just reality. So you look at somebody's life and see what they value. So I think it's okay to have those things that we value. We've kind of thrown those around, right? I think education is something in our culture that we value. Some kind of extracurricular success like academics or arts or whatever, we value those things. Those are okay. There's nothing wrong with those things. But when we put any of those things over the gospel and over what's most important, we value right behavior. We value respect. We value patriotism. We value all those things. Nothing wrong with any of those things. But when any of those things trump the gospel, then we're idolaters. And that's what Paul's going to get into in chapter 10. He said, let me show you what happens when you don't live your life with the gospel being your top priority. Here's what happens. And so we have great pictures that we'll talk about of Israel's history and how we learn lessons from that. But to answer your question, Cameron, I think when Paul says, he gives this great list of the Jew, I became a Jew. To those under the law, I became as those under the law. Not under the law, not under the law, but under Christ's law. To the weak, I became what, it kind of gives this list. Here's what Paul recognized. And he's talking about lost people. He's not talking about people who don't know the Lord, right? Or do know the Lord, Thank you. He's talking about people who don't know the Lord. Mm-hmm. He was willing to become whatever he needed to become to reach those people because he knew their greatest need was Jesus. And I think that is our problem today in our culture, and it's going to be even greater moving forward. Because the more sin gets comfortable manifesting itself in our culture, the less comfortable we're going to be approaching people who don't live like we live. So, I think Paul would look at the Jews and say, the Jews need Jesus. He would look at those who were under the law and say, those people need Jesus. And he would look at people without the law, pagans, Gentiles, they need Jesus. He would look at those who are trying to be moralist and go, they need Jesus. He wasn't convincing people, and this is where we have to be careful. He wasn't convincing people of ideologies. He wasn't trying to convince them to think the way he thought and look at things the way he looked at things and think about things the way he thought about things. They can't do that without Jesus, right? And so what we do is and I just think we have been and we are still in a behavior modification mentality. That if we can modify behavior, somehow behavior modification can lead to salvation at some point. And I think that's kind of been a church model for us.
Yeah.
Shape behavior, salvation.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to get good enough at some point to where you realize I don't know if you need, I don't know how that works, but somehow we think that's the way it works.
Yeah.
So Paul, I think, attacks the heart of the issue. And I think that's what he's saying. He said, I'm living my life, not trying to, you look at it's such a great model, such a great picture of when Paul goes into the synagogue. man, he listens. He doesn't criticize. He affirms all those teachings because they're all true. Everything they're saying is true. But then he takes it to the next step. That's the beauty of, like, Paul would go and think about that in the synagogue. And man, he would teach. Here's what's awesome. Paul would go in because he had the authority. He had the credentials to teach in the synagogue anywhere he went. Well, he would take advantage of that. So you can't say that, again, like he would say, well, my credentials as a Pharisee are rubbish. Well, they weren't rubbish. They got him into the synagogues. So there's value in that. I remember Nate Carr when Nate got saved and really got on fire for the Lord, and he was a bronze medalist in the Olympics and all this kind of stuff. He's like, man, I'm never going to wrestle again because that was my old life, man. I'm just going to preach the gospel. I said, no. I said, dude, like, I hear your heart, but trust me, that has value because God was doing that in your life even before you were saved to give you a platform to talk to people that most of us will never reach. You know, so those things aren't what we're chasing anymore, but God's working in all that too, right? So Paul would go into the synagogue and he would teach a passage out of Isaiah about the suffering servant. And then where they would stop, he would go on and say, now let me tell you who this is. He's actually has already been here and his name was Jesus. You know, so he would go on, and that's when they would be like, "Wow, get the rocks out," you know, stone him, whatever. You know, but then some people would be saved from that. But he didn't go in and offend their system. He didn't go in and crash them. He goes to the Areopagus in Athens, and he goes into all these philosophers. And what does he start doing? He starts quoting philosophy. I love it because he, when you read his sermon at Mars Hill, if you don't know it, you don't know it. But it's full of quotes from their philosophers, secular Stoic philosophers. So he's giving them back their own information.
Yeah.
So what's he doing there? To those not under the law, he became as those not under the law.
Yeah.
Why? So that he may win some. So he's able to come in and with respect, but with authority. You know, he taught, but he came in and he respected them. He didn't disrespect them. He didn't tell them how wrong they were and all this kind of stuff. He spoke their language. He used their material. But then he looked around and he saw that hole that said to the unknown God. He said, guess what, guys? I know him. What? You don't know him? No, none of us know him. He's like, no, I do. His name is Jesus. You know, so I think that's it, man. I think we, when you look at us historically, and I'm only saying this because I used to be this way, or especially early in my Christian life, that when I got saved, I was right and everybody else was wrong. So like there wasn't a whole level of, hey, I'm gonna come in and get to know you, love you, develop a relationship with you, whatever. You gotta listen to me, and if you don't do it, you're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah.
But that was just that kind of blind, running hard mentality, and then Christ matures you through that process. But to hear Paul say that and then try to translate into our culture, I think is our greatest challenge.
Yeah.
As we think about reaching the next generations to come.
Yeah. And it's hard because, like he says, it becomes all things to all people so that he might reach some. There is a limit to that, though. Like, he's not becoming a sinner and involving himself in sinful activities just so he can win people that are involved in that stuff.
Absolutely.
So trying to weigh that out and figure out what that looks like for us is
well, and that's where he says, to those under the law, I became as one under the law, not under God's law, but under Christ's law.
Right.
So he's letting us know that there's obviously boundaries and there's obviously lines that he's not going to cross.
Yeah.
But he's willing to relate to, and I think his point in that is, I'm not going to try to get you to be moral before you're saved.
He was willing to change his approach to sharing the gospel.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, now there are general morals and values that we all have because of conscience that God puts in us, right? God stamps inside of every single person. Paul teaches in Romans 2, a conscience in us that helps us to know right from wrong. So he's not talking about that. He's just talking about, our behavior doesn't come before the kind of behavior Christ wants us to have comes after salvation.
Yeah. So how do we, I mentioned last week talking about Paul saying, if it offends a brother to eat meat, then I won't eat meat
Yeah.
ever again. Now in this one, he's saying, I'll become all things to all people. How do we balance those two and live both of those out practically? Or maybe how does Paul live both of those? Because it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like 8 is more referring to a believer to a believer. So this is people inside the church. He says, if it offends a fellow believer, then I won't do that thing to not offend them or defile their weak conscience. But then on the flip side, now we're talking about to non-believers, he's becoming all things to all people so that he might reach. So how do we practically live both of those out? What does that look like without it being hypocritical?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You're right on target. Chapter 8 is dealing with believers on believers. Mm-hmm. It's dealing with how do we live our lives, in the context of believers and help the weak. The weak believers were the ones who were younger in their faith, but very rigid in their faith. Mm-hmm. Still thought, very, very hard lines. And they were the weaker brothers and sisters because they didn't understand their Christian liberty. They didn't understand that meat was a piece of meat, So Paul would say, well, I'm not going to do anything that would cause a younger brother to stumble. I'm not going to go into a rated R movie because I don't want people seeing me walk into that, because there may be a brother or sister out there in Christ that goes, man, I don't understand that, And I was that guy. I was that guy as a young believer, who would judge those things very quickly, mm-hmm. because I just thought, I couldn't understand how could a believer smoke a cigarette? How could a believer, whatever, mm-hmm. And so I think that's more believer on believer. But I think in 9, he's kind of going into the idea of, man, what am I willing to do with these rights that I have as a believer in Christ? How am I going to live my life? Am I just going to live my life indulging in my Christian liberty? Or am I going to live my life giving it to the sake of whatever I need to become, I'll become that to win somebody to Christ? Mm. Now, within the context, there's always boundaries. He's never going to step outside of Christ's law in his life, mm-hmm. to do that, So I think we've got to be careful there. I think we've seen in the past historically people doing that, being willing to do that, and man, flesh wins over some, in those situations. Like, you just don't put yourself in a situation
right
to where that the gospel's not going to be effective. That's difficult. And I remember back in the days, man, where guys were going into bars, going into strip clubs, whatever, trying to win people to Christ. And if I can't judge if people, God calls you to, I don't know, that's just tough, right? Mm-hmm. When you even, to even say if God calls you to do that, do it. But, yeah. But I think what Paul's saying here is I'm willing to see people that obviously have got brokenness in their life. They've got rigidity in their life. They've got law in their life. They've got things that they need Jesus. Mm. Like, I don't need to go fix them. They need Jesus. And I think what we want to do is that we want to fix the problem before we understand they need Jesus.
Yeah.
And I just think, I was talking to somebody this morning about this, that what is to come is going to be so much harder than what we're even dealing with now.
Mm. Yeah. That's a good word too. I was thinking when you were saying that, the difference, I think, in some people's mind when they try to justify stuff here in this is when you're talking about a believer to a believer with a weak conscience, are we just doing the thing because we have the right to do so and because we have the freedom to do so? Or are we doing it in Paul's context where he's talking about here in chapter 9, where like he is involving himself in whatever this may be, making himself weak or under the law or whatever it may be for the sake of the gospel,
right?
For that non-believer. And so I just wonder in Paul's mind if he ever came across a situation where, just keep with the meat example, where he said, I'm not going to eat meat anymore because it offends this brother or sister. Mm-hmm. But then he had an opportunity to dine at someone's table that didn't know Christ, that was eating this same meat. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would think that if he had that opportunity, he would prioritize them hearing the gospel over offending a fellow brother in Christ. Do you think?
No, you're right. As a matter of fact, we're going to get into that in the second half of chapter 10.
Yeah.
Because the second half of chapter 10, I'll be on vacation next weekend, but the next week I'm here, we'll do the first part of 10 where he talks about lessons from history, man. Here's what happened to the Israelites when they chose to live their lives for themselves and not the next generation to come. And so there's some great stories and this progression of how we go from idolatry to immorality and some things like that. But the second half of 10, he gets back to the chapter 8 stuff, which is really cool because he kind of wraps it up, because 11 starts a whole nother section. So at the end of chapter 10, he kind of wraps it up and he says, all right, and it gets a little harder. He gets kind of, this is where Paul kind of throws the hammer down. And he kind of gets at those people who were actually going to the temple to eat. And he said, look, you can't go sit down at the table of the demons when you're eating at the table of the Lord. Like, you just can't do that. Like, you got to have more sense than that, know? Like, I get your rights, but there are places you don't belong, and that's one of them. Like, you don't belong in the temple eating their meat with them. Right? Now, but then he comes back and says, if you go to a person's house and they put meat in front of you that's been sacrificed to an idol, eat the meat. Eat it. It's not a big deal. But if they bring it to you and they tell you, hey, this has been sacrificed to the god Jupiter, don't eat it. Mm-hmm. It's weird. I mean, it's not just so black and white, man. It really is very relational and very contextual. Yeah. What's the context? What's happening here? Do they have a knowledge of this? And if they do, and they know you do, they may question your Christianity in that.
Yeah.
But if they don't, then don't worry about it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want to look at hypocrisy in the line of black and white, you do and don't. Mm-hmm. Like, I take it like this, where Paul said, if to the Jew I become a Jew. Well, that means he's going to sit down and he's not going to eat pork. Right? So he's not ordering the pork chop that night. Well, if he's sitting down with somebody not under the law and they're serving pork chops, he's eating pork chops.
Yeah.
Because that person has no knowledge of the law. And so he's not going to try to convince them that he shouldn't be eating a pork chop.
Yeah.
He's got the freedom to do that. Not a big deal. You see what I mean? So I think it's that kind of context of him saying, man, I'm willing to make myself uncomfortable for the sake of the gospel. Because it wasn't comfortable for him to become a Jew again, to become under the law again, because he was saved from that.
Yeah.
Christ fulfilled that. He's under Christ's law now.
Yeah.
And that's the key, because his goal never changed. It was consistent.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
When, the outsider perspective would have said his methods are way inconsistent. We can't follow this guy.
Yeah.
But in order to obtain that one goal, which was to win others to Christ,
Right.
he did what he had.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you'd have some people that were saying, Paul, you're not being true to the word.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you're slacking on the gospel, man. You're getting weak in the word, just trying to win people. Yeah. And they got hung up. And I think in our culture, the way it translates is we can get hung up on the method and realize it's not about the method. It's not I call it the vehicle. It's not about the vehicle. Man, it's about what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And as we think about the next generation and making sure we get to the gospel to the next generations and the generations to come, the vehicles is not what's important. There's a value there that we need to uphold. I remember my mentor's wife was like a mother to me and grandmother to our kids, and she was very old school and loved her to death. She was funny because she was all over the map. She was very much Pauline in that she seemed to be, to me back then when I was more hardcore, she seemed to be very liberal to me. Like, I loved her to death, and we would always argue about theology and I'd tease her about being a liberal and this, that, and other. And because she loved everybody. She just loved everybody, man. She had them in her home. Didn't matter who they were, what kind of lifestyle they lived. Like, it didn't matter. She just loved people, and her kids are this. We know we're obviously friends with her kids. They're our age, but they're the same way, And she just had a love for people. But she would always tell me that. She would say, Jeff, when you mature, you're going to love hymns. And I was like, Mimi, I don't know if I'm going to get there or not. And I said, why? Like, why? Because I was in student ministry and I wasn't raised in church. So, I knew hymns, but didn't have this affinity for the hymn book like a lot of people have. But I love him. So if you listen, just know I do. But here's this was her value. I said, Mimi, tell me why you think it's important for students to learn hymns. She says, if they don't learn hymns, where are they going to get good theology? And I thought, from Bible?
Yeah.
From me, hopefully. But her point was, so much rich, because she loved the word, and she knew that the word is taught through, and it is. I mean, a lot of our hymns have great theology in them, and I would say, but so do our now. This was back when our praise and worship songs weren't the greatest. They were called 7-Elevens for a reason,
right?
Because it really did kind of repeat the 7 words 11 times, and that was. But they've gotten so much better now, and I would say that what we do now is the same. They weren't incorrect theologically, but they just, there's a richness and a deepness now, I think, that we have that we probably didn't have 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
When it was all just coming out and we were singing Pharaoh, Pharaoh, whoa, let my people go. But her value was theology, the word. It's a great value. Don't protect the vehicle.
Yeah.
All right. She was focused on the vehicle. So that's not the value is what you got to be focused on.
That's right.
So focus on the value, not the vehicle. Yeah. And so I think that's just what's hard for people to get their mind wrapped around.
Yeah. Because
I think they don't understand that when they think they're pushing a preference, it's not a preference they're pushing. They're protecting a value. We have people in our church who are protecting the value of a traditional hymn-led worship service, because that's the way they grew up. That's the way they learned what they learned and got to where they are, and they feel like it's worth passing down to the next generation. Nothing wrong with that. But what's the purpose? What's the goal? What's the end result? Is that we want to draw people closer to Christ. So, we try to exercise this philosophy in our church, right? To the traditional people, we want to be traditional. To the modern people, we want to be modern. To the blended people, we want to be blended. We'll do all things to all people that we could reach some. Your business people would tell you, man, you're never going to do well at that. Pick one and be great at it. But I just don't think that's a biblical model. I think for our context, it's harder, but I think it's the right thing for us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of, you talked some about values, things that Paul valued, things that we value. I'll go to Patty on this one to give your voice a little bit of a break.
Thank you.
But what are some of the values that we cherish at Emmanuel?
Yeah. I mean, if you walk anywhere on campus, hopefully you're going to encounter signage that says and speaks to just that, because we do want to let anyone and remind ourselves know what our core values are, what we believe as Emmanuel Baptist Church. So the first one is every person matters.
Yep.
Second one, every Christian is a disciple.
Yeah. So what does every person matters mean?
Every person, every single person. And as I was looking through this and just kind of reflecting, I thought about, okay, have there been times where we didn't live that out? Where someone walked in our church and went, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
This doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
That hurts my heart, first of all. But I'm thinking back to one of our student choir evenings. In the arts, I've partnered over the years with our counseling ministry, and Bill called me and said, I've got this teenager. I really think the only place to bring this person into church at all would be through the arts. And so he asked me to come over and just meet with her, chat with her, get to know her a little bit. And, had some colored hair and some different vibes about her appearance than what we're used to. And so reached out to the family and brought this person into a practice one night. And, of course, her goal was to remain invisible. And she had the hood up over her head and kind of sat back in the corner. So it took a little while to kind of bring her out in with the rest of the crew. And a few people kind of reached out and attempted. And she wasn't overtly receptive, but she never came back. I reached out several times. How you doing? Just inquiring. Enjoyed having you there. Just cordial, but nothing like, I'll be back. I loved it. It was amazing.
Right.
And so I asked my students the following week, I'm like, has anybody noticed anybody missing? Nothing. Crickets.
Yeah.
I'm like, what about that person?
Right.
That gave us a chance.
Right.
And we didn't extend that same opportunity
to
the fullest. So did she feel like she mattered?
Right.
Probably not. And that makes me sad.
Yeah.
It really
does.
does.
And that's the reason. And we know the answer to that question. That's why I ask you. But at the same time, like, every person matters. Every person matters to God, and every person should matter to us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what they look like, what color they are, how they dress, what color their hair is, how many earrings they have, how many piercings they have, whatever, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
They matter to God. And so we've got to make sure that we create an environment where at least they feel welcome.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, we're all broken.
That's right.
Each one of us.
Yep.
You know, no matter our exterior, internally, we're all broken and in need of Jesus.
Yeah.
So every person matters.
Yep.
Every Christian is a disciple. Stop me if you have a question. Every disciple is a missionary. Every home is a sanctuary. And every generation matters.
Yep.
Those are our core values.
That's good. And like you said, they're on in 3 different walls in our lobby and kind of put around the church. And so we try to make those very visible. One of the things, and on our website, social media, wherever you look. So hopefully you've heard those if you're part of our church. But one thing we were talking about this in our life group a few weeks ago, and I think I told you this, but I know you've experienced this with preaching or whatever. But while we were having a conversation just about our values and our mission statement and everything, something just kind of came to me that I said that was not something that I had previously planned. So it was obviously the Holy Spirit saying it, and it has stuck with me so firmly since that night. But we were talking about our values, and the way we kind of wrapped up is, what is the church? Like when we talk about Emmanuel, when we talk about these are the values of Emmanuel. The church of Emmanuel Baptist Church is the people that are here, is the people in the church. The church is not a building. It's not a place. It's not a location. It's not an address. The church is the people. Right. And so if these are values of Emmanuel, are these just values of our staff? Are they just values on our website or on a wall? Or are they our values? Or are they things that we are actually valuing in not just our life or our time here, but are they things that we actually value in our life? Which was super convicting for me. But man, I started to think through, what would it look like if we truly valued those things?
Yeah.
If we valued, if it was a value of ours that every person matters, that every person we walk, not just every person we see on Sunday,
right,
but every person
right.
we pass on the street, every person we pass in the store, every person that we work with matters. And then if we saw ourselves as Christians, as a disciple, which hopefully we do, which means we are being discipled, but we are also discipling. Every disciple is a missionary. Right. Every generation matters, and every home is a sanctuary. I think if we actually valued all those things personally, man, it would transform not just our lives, not just our families' lives, but it would transform this church. It would transform this community. So that was super, super convicting for me.
I think one of the things that are cool about our values, and I was talking to a potential student pastor candidate about this at lunch, is those 5 values, for us, didn't come up in some kind of 2-hour session where we drew a box on the whiteboard and said, hey, let's go through the Oxano process of figuring out what our mission and values are.
Which we kind of tried that a couple times.
Yeah.
We had a few meetings, was like, we're going to come up with a...
Yeah, we did, because that's what you do. That's what every place does. Yeah. And it just didn't make sense to me, because it was like, it's easy to come up with 5 statements and just fabricate them and think and then they just become, statements on a wall. Yeah. But these were actually, I think, born out of who we all are. And we just decided it's going to take a couple year process for us to do it, because, we're putting a team together of people that we want to buy into these. And I think, everything that we talk about, decisions that we make, come out of our values, and I think when you are letting your values, this is the thing in business and organizational leadership, or in life, when you're letting your values determine your decisions, then you've got real life there. Like that's when you're really flowing, you're clicking, when your values are making decisions. And when you see your values violated, that's when you're doing something about it. And so I think in life, when we're allowing that, so these aren't just church values, that these should be, any family in our church could adopt those 5 values. And so I think there's so many things, there's so many places that this stuff could go. Like my mind starts going into creating curriculum and doing stuff. How do we help families create value statements for their for them and all that kind of stuff that I've thought about over the years. But But you just take those 5 values and just teach those to your kids. You know, man, that could easily be something that we could do with our families.
And eventually they become organic.
Yes, absolutely.
You look at, we just had VBS, which was amazing. But you take a look at our worship rally team. You had representation from 6th grade to 4th quarter, as you call it.
Yep, that's right.
On the stage, attempting to do the same choreography.
Yes.
But ultimately, just loving on children.
Yep.
So that just happened, again, organically.
Yes.
Because that's who we are.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And every person asked to serve in that capacity said, absolutely.
Yes.
Without hesitation. And that's where we want to be.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And kind of with this conversation, it doesn't make it easy. But if we truly value, take Every Generation Matters, for example, we've said that for a few years now. It's one of those statements that can very easily turn to, and I think at times it probably has, or in certain circles or whatever it may be, but Every Generation Matters can be an excuse to complain about something because you're not catering to my generation.
Yes.
Or, Every Generation Matters, then why aren't we doing this? But if we personally value Every Generation Matters, then that is, how can I either learn from or pour into or be involved with other generations? I think it completely shifts our perspective. And I don't know who I was talking to recently, but I've seen that so much more that I think we've kind of hit a turning point where I've seen that a lot more clearly in the last few months, where I've seen, people in my generation or college students who are involved with, some of our golden gems or what's the church chicks, those kind of, and the kind of combination of generations and, more middle-aged pouring into kids or pouring into students and wanting to get involved. Like, that's what it looks like for Every Generation that Matters. When Every Generation Matters to me, when that's a value of mine, then I am now doing what I can to make that evident and make that real, so that other people and other generations can experience the truth of the gospel. Whether they're a believer and the gospel is transforming their life, or they're a lost person who hasn't heard the gospel. Like, when Every Generation Matters, I can do something about that. And so
let me say this about values. If you're building a value set that just benefits you, they're probably not biblical values. Like, this term Every Generation Matters is not your defense statement.
Right.
So anytime that's used in defense of yourself, it is not a biblical value. A biblical value is always looking at someone else. And so when I say Every Generation Matters, that means, what am I willing to do? How am I willing to get uncomfortable to reach the next generation? So, don't be using that as a defense mechanism. Because but that's what we have a tendency to do, though. Is, we've got to get people thinking about, and this is the hard thing to do. And I don't think it's about your all generation as much. Patty's not that much younger than me. How old are you, Patty?
Ish.
Okay, so you're not that much. I mean, you're younger than I am, probably 10 years at least or more. But anyway, but like, and I do think there's something unique about, like, hitting 60 and getting, because what we're doing right now in ministry is not for my family. It's not for me and Julie. I mean, it's really not. I mean, we benefit from it. We love it. We enjoy it. We're having the best time of our lives in ministry right now. This is the best time of our life, period. I mean, it's just a great time to be where we are with who we're with, right? But also know that what we're building is not for us. It's just not. I mean, man, God gives me 20 more years. Man, praise God. 80, as long as I'm still healthy, good. But it's still not for me. I've got to be concerned about my daughter and son that go here and their children that go here. So Graham is just a year old. So what's going to guarantee that Graham and Birdie and Braylon and Leo and Hannon and, see, I'm tying you here, and Hudson, those kids will want to come to this church when it's their choice. That's what we're building. I think of all the grandkids of the people my age, that we're friends with and we run with, and all those kids that are at Vacation Bible School and our preschool musicals and our kids musicals and all, like when those kids are in their 20s and they're married and they're choosing a church.
Yeah.
That's what we're building. And if that's not our mentality, we're not thinking about the next generation.
Yeah.
Because we're not building anything for me. We're just not. Because we've had our day, we've had our time, and we had people before us that did that for us and thought of us and were concerned about us. And people plowed ground like Brother Owens and other people, you know, threw ideas out. Ken Hux threw ideas out that are just now coming to fruition. You know, John attempted things that are coming to fruition. You know, Tom Suter, all the people that have been in this church that had a vision and wanted to see something happen. We are getting to be the people who get to flesh that stuff out.
Yep.
I remember 7 years ago, you know, sitting with Tom Suter and looking at drawing things and drawings, and it's really the kind of where we are right now. You know, it's where we landed. Maybe plus a student building, but it's where we landed. But it took us all that time and all those people to get here.
Yep.
You know, and that was just God's timing and his purpose. So all that shows us, man, we're building this for generations to come.
Yep.
So, you know, we have a tendency to protect more, I think, in that fourth quarter than you do the first three.
Yeah.
Because the first three, man, you're just playing the game, you know, but we got to be careful not to start getting defensive and start protecting our lead. We got to continue to be offensive. And I think that's what I see out of Paul. He gets down to that last part and he uses that athletic picture when he talks about running the race. You know, I've never really seen that connected to the rest of 9, but most people pull that out and preach it separately. You know, but it's still a part of that 9 because he's talking about becoming all things to all people that he may win some. And then he goes into this running a race analogy. And it's really his closing illustration to that part of the letter.
Yeah.
You know, all runners run a race, but only one wins. Run to win. You know, run to win. And I you know, used a great line, you know, if you ain't first, you're last. I mean, that was kind of Paul's mentality. I mean, you got to run to win. You don't run to place. You don't run to finish. You don't run to, you know, you don't get a participation trophy. You run to win. And the beauty about us is we've already won.
Yeah.
So we're running a race. We've already won. So I think he's saying, run like you're a winner.
Yeah.
Like you've got the prize. The prize is Jesus.
Right.
So run your race, live your life. That's the race is life. Live your life in such a way that you want to win as many people as you can to Christ. So, man, use your rights, not for your flesh, the indulgence of your flesh, but for the sake of others, showing people what the gospel is. Yeah. I mean, our lives can either reflect the image of Christ or it can damage the image of Christ. It does one or the other. Yeah. It's not neutral. Because if we're known to be believers in Christ, and people know that about us, then we're going to do one or the other. We're going to reflect his glory, or we're going to kind of deflect it almost, and just it's going to be about us.
Yeah.
And man, we can't do anything for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, so run to win, train to win, you know, live our lives to win. He says, I beat my body, I put it in submission. That's what he's talking about, those rights. He said, I fight the things I want to do, and I fight for the sake of others. And then people may go, well, what about us? You know, what do we get out of this? You kidding me?
Yeah.
What kind of question is that? We get eternity.
Yeah.
We get eternity with Jesus, serving with him, leading with him. Man, you know, away from all this, this is so short term, but we can't see that. It's just, it's hard. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
And I love the point that you made, or the reminders you gave us on Sunday to reflect on what it means to be lost, what it means to be saved. We've been there.
Yeah.
And when you truly think back to your life, I did as a lost person, you know, when I was thinking about this, it just took me back to when I read the scripture and it made sense for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, the Lord was pursuing me, and I asked a wise person, where should I even start?
Yeah.
You know, I'd been in bits and pieces of the Bible growing up, but had never just sat down. But let's get into 3 John. But
3 John?
The 3rd. I'm like, okay, but I misunderstood.
What about first and second?
They said 3rd.
Wow.
I misunderstood and did do first.
Nice.
And so I get into 1 John, and it was just like my eyes were open.
Wow.
You know, I was captive.
Yeah.
And there was freedom when those words came.
Yeah.
And so when you start looking at life as a lost person and then looking at what Jesus did for us on the cross, that cross becomes so precious to us.
Yes.
So valuable. And so our race is different. There's
Yes.
passion and there's purpose.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we don't want anybody else to hover where
Yeah.
we've been or to suffer an eternity that we know is real
Right.
without Christ.
I'm telling you, one of the, for me at least, when the Spirit just brought it to my mind and I wrote it down, statements that just I don't say shocked me, but was so true and telling, is that when I said we can create athletic, educated, polite, generous, patriotic children who die and go to hell.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, that's because all of those things are important.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do all of those things and you miss the gospel, Jesus said, what does it benefit you to gain the world and lose your soul?
Yeah.
You know, so, and what's amazing is that we don't get this because it's the only world we know. We've been fed that because we're America, the greatest country in the world.
Yeah.
Right. So we get all of that, and the land of the free and the brave, and you know, the American way and the capitalist society, and you can do anything you want, be anything you want, all this kind of stuff. So all of these great opportunistic values come at us, and wonderful, but not at the sake of the gospel.
Right.
You know, the gospel can't be third, fourth, fifth. It's got to be number one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have to reorient parents. And, you know, we have a great culture in our country, but we have to fight against it every day because our culture in our country is telling our people, here's the things you pursue. Boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. And it's going to continually move away from, you know, we're talking to a youth pastor candidate from Michigan, and he's telling us about, he's close to Lansing, and just about what it's like, the culture and climate up there. Political climate's crazy, he said, and schools are so far away from letting a pastor come on campus. We still have access to schools here.
Yeah.
You know, we still have the opportunity and the trust and people that will let us into those places, which is great, man. Take advantage of that. You know, so I just think we've got to be careful to not think that being a great American has anything to do with you getting into heaven. Because it doesn't. I mean, it has nothing to do with it. You know, no more than, again, the pride that Israel had in their father Abraham that Jesus spoke to a lot.
Yeah.
You know, we're not careful, we can find ourselves in the very same boat.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good stuff. That's all I had. You know, as we were talking about our values and what it means to actually live those and value them to ourselves. Patty mentioned at the beginning I know of one of our girls that was on the Kenya trip is now at CentriKid.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great example. And I'll shout out Paige Porter, but was in Kenya for a week, got home, you know, mid-afternoon on Sunday, and then left on midday Monday to go be with kids for a week. Yeah. Like, you could ask her, why in the world would you sign up for both of those? Why would you take 2 weeks off of work to do these? And I think, every person matters.
That's right.
That's a value of hers. Every generation matters. It's a value of hers. Every Christian is a disciple.
Yep.
And so for someone like that is living it out, and I know the other two as well, that she's living those out as well. So.
Our mission field just changed rapidly.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
But you know what? I've become all things to all people that I might win some.
Yep.
It's a great picture of how somebody's living that out in our time and culture today.
Yep.
Man, to the Kenyans, I become Kenyans as much as I can be. To the children, I'll become children as much as I can be. Just that maybe I could win some.
Yep.
That's what that means, man. That's it. Like the living example. It's awesome.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for listening. We will see you next week.
I will not see you next week.
Why not?
I won't be here for the podcast.
Jeff's going to the beach.
I'm going to the condo where there is a beach. I'll probably
near a beach.
I'll probably have to actually get on the beach this time.
Jeff will be glimpsing.
I'm going to send you a
the
picture
beach.
of me on the beach.
Nice. Well, we won't be jealous at all.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not much fun on the beach.
Oh, we hope you get some
But
rest.
you wouldn't
and
go for
enjoy
me
your
anyway.
time.
You'd go for the beach.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. Like, I don't care. All
Well,
right.
y'all have a good time.
Thanks,
We'll see you
buddy.
guys next week.